Okay, great. Take it away, Mark.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I don't have a sense of how many folks are on the call, but I appreciate you taking some time this evening to hear a little bit about EC from a human resources perspective. I'll just do a quick introduction. My name is Mark Bailey. I'm our Executive Director of Staffing. I've been with our district since May of 2023. I am also a former EC teacher who married another EC teacher. So EC instruction, great teachers, great services for kids has always been very important to me. I'm a former high school assistant principal as well and K-8 principal. So again, I've been with Human Resources in Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools since May of 2023. And I'm going to kind of walk you through just a quick staffing update. I think you probably get a version of this information from Fonda and her team pretty regularly, but I'll just touch on it real quick. And then I was also asked to share some information about EC compensation. And that's why I have some information here regarding our teachers and our teaching assistants, so you can have a sense of what that looks like. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. All right. We'll start by kind of going through vacancies and then going through recruitment and retention.
Perfect.
Okay, this is updated yesterday. No changes today, so you can say it's updated through today as well. We are 96% staffed in our certified positions. In school-based positions, we have 3 current vacancies for elementary teachers, 2 for high school teachers, and none for middle school. In classified staff, we are 92% staff. You can see what the breakdown there is. A few teaching positions kind of spread across elementary, middle, and high school. And our central office is staffed at 88%. And I have the actual positions that are currently vacant listed here as well. I will say in my time since I've been here, this is probably the strongest staffing percentage that we've had, specifically as it relates to school-based certified staff. When I initially came, I think EC was considered a huge priority, both in terms of recruitment and retention. When you look at vacancies in schools, that obviously has a huge impact on kids. And for our EC positions, that has a trickle-down effect in terms of things like compliance and liability and all that. And I think today, we no longer consider EC to be necessarily an area in which we are struggling disproportionately to recruit and retain staff. So a huge success, I think, that is largely attributed to the leadership of our EC department, the strength of our principals, and more than anything, just the quality of our EC teachers and teaching assistants in our schools. We can go to the next slide. So I'll talk through some challenges. So I'm now the ED of staffing. I was the director of recruitment for my first year and a half or so here. So I was really focused on recruiting. So we have 80 student teachers this year, and 10 of them have an EC focus. This is actually an improvement from last year. So even though this is a very small percentage, this is actually better than it was last year. You can see the breakdown here between speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and general curriculum teachers. Those are the 3 different courses of study that our student teachers are engaged in. Our student teachers tend to be one of our most productive pipelines. So we want to see student teachers who have an EC background. I'll say this, the regional curriculum teacher seems relatively low. Last year, that number was 0. So, we're encouraged that it's a little bit better than it was last year. But as you can see, this is not like the robust pipeline for special educators that it is for general educators. So while we're certainly going to do everything we can to cultivate our student teachers, we know that we cannot rely on student teachers, heavily for EC recruitment. Staff referrals. Since May of 2023, we've had 56 new hires that are results of staff referrals. 9 of those are for EC positions. So nothing like that really stands out there other than, it's a hard to recruit position for professional human resources employees. So it's also hard for folks in our community to find great folks and get them to our district. So that's not really that surprising there. And then in terms of retention, this is June 2024 data. And I think at that time it showed that our retention, our attrition in EC was actually disproportionate to our non-EC positions. I think we'll see when we look at the 24-25 school year that those numbers have really stabilized. And we're not going to see that our EC attrition looks different or worse in any way than our general attrition. So again, I'm looking forward to crunching those numbers at the end of the school year and seeing the data kind of play out what I'm seeing anecdotally as our team kind of takes on separation paperwork and everything else from employees. You can go to the next slide. The Tea to Teach program. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. I was also asked to touch on this, and I'm happy to do it. So TA to Teach is a program that I'm really passionate about. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a pathway for teaching assistants to step into the classroom. And now it is a broad approach to this. It includes engaging with teaching assistants who may have an associate's degree, and then working with them to not only earn their bachelor's, but then also on top of that, earn their teaching certificate. As you can imagine, that is a long road for those individuals and a long road to filling EC teaching positions for our district. So it really is playing the long game there. There's other folks who already have bachelor's degrees who can sometimes enter what we call residency programs and begin teaching immediately. We find when that is successful, it's usually with folks who have previously been EC teaching assistants and they're very familiar with the EC classroom, and they're able to kind of step in pretty seamlessly for a new teacher because they're not new to the EC setting in our public school system and in our district specifically. We've partnered with NC Central historically. So in cohort 3, you can see we had 11 participants. Only one of them had an EC focus. And this program only has 2 areas of focus. It's EC and elementary ed. So you can see out of 11, 10 were elementary ed and 1 was EC. In cohort 4, that's the cohort that I welcomed when I first started here. We had 9 participants and 3 of them are in EC. And then we did a special cohort that was funded by a PS Public School Foundation grant. We welcomed them the last spring, and that was through Greensboro College. That was an EC only cohort, and both of those individuals already had bachelor's degrees and were able to step in and become teachers of record this school year as they complete the program. So TA to Teach, kind of like student teachers, is a really important pipeline overall for our district. But as you can see here, it doesn't have the numbers that we would need to really count on it as our primary pipeline for finding EC teachers for our district. You can go to the next slide. Here we go. And then looking externally, college, university recruitment fairs. If I'm being fully transparent with you, I'm sure that you have heard some information about our district's reduction in force. Because of that, our recruitment this year has looked very different than recruitment last year, but I do want to kind of give you a sense of what that landscape looked like during the 23-24 school year, because that's the last time that we really had a complete and robust recruitment effort externally. So we went to 17 college and university career fairs, met 201 candidates who were interested in our district, and 19 of those were interested in EC opportunities. Some quick math tells me that's less than 10%. We also had our own career fair. We held that at Chapel Hill High School back in March last year. 121 candidates, 18 expressed interest in EC opportunities. I attended the Council for Exceptional Children Regional Conference in 23-24. That was our first time doing that, trying something new. I was only able to engage with 7 candidates. That one was a little bit awkward because folks who were there were generally there with their school teams and administrators. So just as you can imagine, it was a bit of a tricky situation for me to be recruiting folks as they came to talk to me with their principals. But we wanted to see, if we go to some events that are specifically designed for EC professionals, is that going to be a different kind of recruitment atmosphere? Because you can see these other situations, we're looking at fewer than 10% of folks who are there either have a background in or are interested in EC. You can go on. Okay. I'm going to kind of get through these next couple of slides and then just stop for questions, if that makes sense. And I certainly have all the time in the world, and we'll see if folks have questions for me. EC compensation. So If you look at this here, what I've tried to share here with you is what we use to determine compensation. Now, for teacher compensation, we're generally looking, with some exceptions, at two different salary schedules. One for teachers with a bachelor's degree and one for teachers with a master's degree. Now, the trick with the master's degree, though, is to be eligible for that you have to have completed at least one master's level course prior to August 1st, 2013. That's where the state will begin providing master's pay. But we look at these two schedules, and they come out every year. The state says they're going to release the new schedule every year in July. It tends to be closer to October, but we know it's coming every year. And this gives us sort of the baseline for what teachers will be paid. Now, the benefit of coming to Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools is we have a supplement on top of this number. Now, every district has a supplement, but our supplement is 18% for gen ed teachers and 20% for EC teachers. You can see from this that EC teachers who are more experienced, if you're a 23-year veteran EC teacher, you're getting a 24% supplement. And once you get over 25 years, you're getting a 29% supplement. That means whatever that number is that you're getting from the state, you are getting 29% on top of that if you are an EC teacher with more than 25 years of experience. The same thing is true for master's pay in terms of what that supplement looks like. Whatever the general curriculum supplement is for teachers, EC teachers receive an additional 2%. So the good news here is we are competitive across the state. There are very few districts that can really come very close to matching our supplement. And pretty much all public school districts are using the exact same salary schedule from the state as the baseline to base these salaries on. The negative is if we're just talking about a competitive recruitment atmosphere, we're not able to generate, more competitive salaries for especially effective teachers, whether that's new, really effective teachers that we're trying to recruit or incredible teachers we have that we want to retain. And so, if we're competing with like nonprofits or the ed tech world, then, we're pretty limited in what we can do. What I always share with employees during new hire orientation is, one of the negatives of working for a public school system is that there's not a lot of flexibility in pay, but one of the positives is that it's super transparent. So you really don't have to wonder how people are getting paid or what they're getting paid because it's based upon these factors: years of experience, licensure, and their level of education. We'll go to the next slide here. When you look at teaching assistants, that's based on an hourly rate of pay. So I wanted to show to you here just the first three grades of our classified salary schedule. That's grade 101, 102, and 103. Now I have some, what I picked out were sort of like the most common positions in our district that are applied to these three scales. So grade 101, we have several types of employees who are paid on grade 101: bus monitors, custodians, receptionists. Grade 102 is slightly higher than grade 101, and you can see the actual numbers here. And that's for this year's salary schedule. And that includes like crossing guards, secretaries, and elementary teaching assistants, importantly. Level 103 includes our EC teaching assistants. So similar to our teaching scale, EC teaching assistants receive slightly more than elementary teaching assistants. That being said, I've highlighted those numbers there, and those numbers are not incredibly high. That is an hourly rate of pay for our EC teaching assistants. Now, I've also linked in here, and I'm happy, whatever method this team uses to share resources, to share a copy of this and with folks who need to see it. But I've linked in here our classified salary placement guidelines. I just want to warn you that teaching salary schedule that I laid out, I think is very straightforward. If I have a bachelor's and 7 years of experience in schools, I can pretty easily figure out what is my salary going to be. I can multiply it by 20% to see what my supplement is, and that's a wrap. The classified salary placement guidelines are much more complicated. You can see these grades don't even have a placement at level 1. So it's just a lot harder to say, oh, an elementary teaching assistant with 13 years would be on level 13. Not necessarily. If they're new to our district, the highest level we can begin someone at is level 9. I don't want to get into that because also it's not really my area of expertise. I can just tell you that classified salary schedule placement which would apply to our teaching assistants, is so complicated that if I receive a request for hire, I would never quote a salary without going to our licensure and salary specialist. I don't have enough confidence in my ability to like follow all the steps. But I can promise you that office does it with excellence and consistency. But I want you to be able to see what that salary schedule looks like for our EC teaching assistants. And I think that's it. The next slide should be just like a questions slide.
No, I think this is it actually right here.
There we go. So we'll just pretend there's a question slide. I'm not sure why you can't see me here. I'm on my phone. My phone has a camera. I don't mean to be off camera or to seem in any way disengaged. I can promise you that I'm here in my office. And I'll defer to you in terms of what makes the most sense now, but I'm happy to take questions or to talk more about anything that I shared this evening.
And I think if you'd like to ask Mark a question, you could raise your hand. We can mic you, right, Ben? And then if you can also we'll read your question if you drop it in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. So please
feel free to use the raise hand function or the Q&A or the webinar chat. We're monitoring all three. In the meantime, Mark, I've got a question for you myself. Can you explain where the funding for the supplement comes from?
Yeah, from local funding. So the supplement is local funding. So that is like county, like the simple way of like describing it is kind of like those are our local like county taxes. That's why we have it's not surprising to anybody who lives here that we have a higher, like a bigger tax base or higher taxes that sort of result in that higher supplement. But it is a direct correlation to local taxes. So that is local funding. That what's on that state salary schedule is state funding. And then there are some employees who are federally funded in EC because there are federal funds for EC. I didn't really talk about those. I don't necessarily have the expertise to do so, but those are a little bit of a different situation.
Excellent, thank you. And just out of curiosity, is there any other way that the supplement can be filled, or is it purely through Orange County taxes?
To my knowledge, that is based on our tax base. Like, yeah, so those are local funds.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, Allie, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Feel free to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
I
I
can.
can hear you.
Okay, great. I have a kindergartner at McDougall Elementary, and so I'm new to all this. This is my first SNAC meeting, but thank you, Mark, for doing this. Super helpful. I just want to know, based on your experience with teachers, I think my son's EC teacher is wonderful. She's just done a great job of connecting with him and motivating him. What do you think EC teachers are saying? What are you hearing? How can we help support retaining the teachers we currently have? Like, have you heard from them? Like, what can I do besides asking her directly, which I will? What can we do to just help retain the awesome EC teachers we already have?
That's a great question. I was able to have a handful of in-person exit interviews with folks who have left. When I was a principal, I really leaned on what we call stay interviews, which are, systematic conversations with folks who are currently and staying in your organization to find out why they stay, right? Because you don't want to just talk to people who are leaving. You also want to find out, like, why are people staying? I'll say from that conversation, I think I identified things that one big factor that is systematic and one factor that is maybe a little bit more sort of in the control of the folks that are on this call. So I think the systematic thing that is really challenging for EC teachers is just, there is all the same teaching responsibilities as a gen ed teacher. There's lesson planning, there's assessing, there's tracking student progress, there's communicating with parents about grades, all of that, right? Add on top of that the paperwork responsibilities around IEPs, eligibility, evaluations, reevaluations, and the challenge of logistically scheduling those meetings. So I think for a lot of REC teachers, they adore teaching. They love planning. They really geek out over it. They love kids. I have not talked to a ton of EC teachers who have really come to this profession because they love paperwork. I think they understand that paperwork holds us accountable for providing what kids need, but it is a grind, and in some cases, it is a drain. Now, what's tough there is there's not a lot of control that you have over that, nor is there control that I have over that. We can try to like provide release time for teachers, flex time for teachers, just recognize to not overschedule them on non-instructional days so they have a chance to catch up on that. But I think that is a big factor. If I'm speaking honestly, like my wife and I said, we're both EC teachers. That was past tense. And for me, the biggest sort of reason why I would be hesitant to return to the EC classroom would be the amount of paperwork. I think the thing that's outside of that, and I will say overwhelmingly, the teachers that I've spoken to have spoken positively about the support and trust that they have received from parents. But as you can imagine, when you pour so much of yourself into a job like this, if you are sort of like not met with that support and trust, if you are met with skepticism or, in any way, sort of like questioning intentions, I think that can also be pretty discouraging. And so I think in those rare cases when EC teachers have felt like they're not really in partnership with parents, but maybe having to be defensive or having to constantly justify like what they're doing or what they're seeing, I think that can add to a level of frustration. So I don't think I've revealed anything in those two things that are surprising necessarily. I don't think any job enjoys paperwork for the most part, but I do think the paperwork and the logistics that are part of an EC teacher's job truly are unique compared to their gen ed counterparts. And then I do think it's an emotional and folks are invested in this work. And if they feel like they're bringing their full selves and they're pouring themselves into kids, if they feel like that is somehow questioned, then I think that can also just be incredibly discouraging.
Thank you, Mark. I think also Alston Morgan's on here too. I think one of the things is that we didn't discuss this, but there are many, and I don't know if you have stats on this, about how many of our district employees live outside of Chapel Hill, and the commute times, but I know that this has been discussed in other contexts that I've been a part of, is that a lot of our staff is from outside of our district. I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit. That's not something I prepared you for, sorry.
And now are you referencing like that being a challenge just in terms of like things like commute or what
Yeah, I think that's where Alston Morgan's going. She can clarify too, but I think, a lot of our district staff work out, don't live here. Um, that goes for a lot of town jobs within Chapel Hill too, but it's not just our district specific either. But I don't know if you could speak to that as well.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to give statistics on that because I'm kind of a data person and I think I'd be curious to know what that looks like. I can say anecdotally speaking, both for like our school-based staff and for the staff that I work directly with in central office, I have been shocked by the commutes that folks have and the kind of regularity of just, 45-minute, hour plus daily commutes each way. When you look at that time requirement and you add on to it, then I would imagine that really contributes to potential attrition as well. Is just looking for something closer to home that may not pay quite that same supplement, right? But you take away the commute and like the time and the actual cost of that, then maybe it even starts to even out. So anecdotally, I'll say that's consistent with what I've found as well. I've been really surprised with the length that folks travel.
And I think that speaks probably to the supplement that we can offer people, but I'm sure that also speaks eventually to attrition in that, you might not want to make that commute if you have kids now or your life changes. Um, but I hear what Alston's plugging in the chat. Alston also chimed in that our teachers need supplies. So one of the things that, you might want to coordinate with your teachers is ask them if it's snacks or supplies for their classroom. I think that's a great idea of where to start. If you have a home, like, if you have a homeroom, a home parent, in your classroom, that might be something that you could discuss with classroom teachers as well. I'm just reviewing what's in the chat. Does anyone else have questions? I'll leave it open for a little while.
All right, Allie, I think you're still
You're
able
still
to
on,
talk.
Allie,
Yeah.
so
Mike,
chime
okay.
in.
I just wanted to ask, it sounds like you're not doing as many teacher fairs and things, but if I don't know if other people feel this way, but I'm here for a journey, having a kindergartner, here for a long journey, and so I felt very invested in this. If you ever feel like parents can help with recruitment or retention, I I just wanted to say that. If you ever feel like, I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if other parents feel that way, but especially with having consistent person to work with it with my child, especially feels very important year to year. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's ever been in the plan or could be in the plan.
Absolutely. That's incredibly helpful. And I can't think of a more invested group of potential recruiters than the parents of our students who receive EC services. And not just with getting people, right, but getting great people and people who want to stay and want to build a career here as well. And we're still doing recruitment. So we're going to have a local fair. I can give you a sense, in previous years, we've been in the Chapel Hill High School gym. Every single school has brought like 3 to 5 people. They've been there the entire morning on a Saturday. We're looking at a potential situation where very we'll have some schools that have no vacancies for next year, no confirmed vacancies. So we don't want to like recruit at the same in the same way when we don't have the same kind of positions. But we are going to be strategic around EC, pre-K, transportation, some areas in which we know we need to keep a really robust pipeline. And we'll work on making sure that folks who come to that fair know that that is specifically what we're looking for. And hopefully, I don't want to give you guys the impression that we're pausing recruiting because, overall, we're staffed at, 96% in terms of certified positions. We're staffed right now at 99.2% in terms of certified positions in our district. I say that knowing that if you're the parent of a kid who's in, the classroom of that point zero, like that 0.8, as far as you're concerned, like we haven't met our staffing goals because your child doesn't have a caring, consistent adult every single day that you can like rely on. So until that number is 100, it's nothing really to kind of like rest our hat on, so to speak. But I do appreciate the offer, and I think we know that SNAC is a group that we can go to when it comes to recognizing our staff. We've done that previously. And it's also helpful to think of them as potential recruiters or folks who can help get the word out about recruiting opportunities that we have.
And I've discussed this, Mark, with I'm chiming in, but everybody feel free to continue to ask questions and drop things in the chat. But parents can help and apply to be substitute teachers. So that's also one way, not that that fills, massive amounts of vacancies, but Mark, would you like to speak to that? And
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've taken it when I got into this role, I asked to take over sort of the substitute process. I was in charge of class coverage for 20 years in schools, and I feel very strongly about substitute availability and the trickle down effect of that. I would say right now our substitute fill rate on a daily basis is probably somewhere between 65 and 75%. I think anything below 90 is to me like not where we want to be. So that's a place where we have a lot of room to grow. We have noticed, and you're not here for pre-K, but I will just say specifically substitute assignments in pre-K and for ECAC tend to be the substitute assignments that don't get picked up as regularly. Pre-K I won't speak to, that's its own situation. But for ECAC, my assumption here is we have a lot of substitutes who have really no sense of what that might entail. It might feel like they're going to be asked to do things, whether it is provide, medical support, whether it's, whatever it might be that they're not prepared to do, and they don't want to irresponsibly take on an assignment. And so we've tried to be really clear on ECAC substitute assignments, whether they're for teachers or teaching assistants, what role exactly we'd be asking a substitute to play. That being said, yes, I do agree that if we have parents who have any flexibility in their schedule, who have interest in stepping in to support our ECAC classrooms or our EC classrooms in general, it is an area that is hugely helpful. I'll say this too. We don't, if we have an elementary teaching assistant who is absent, we actually don't post substitute positions for that. That is not the case for EC teaching assistants. So it's not just teachers. If an EC teaching assistant is going to be absent, they also can put in for a sub, and that position can be filled by a substitute for that day, because we recognize how important it is to have a complete set of support present in that classroom. But yes, if you're interested, it's on our job board. If you go to substitute, is the only job that is linked. I think it's job 754. If you apply for it, my team is going to process your application, and you will eventually do substitute orientation with me. And I would, as much as we might be on a hiring freeze for certain positions in which we don't have need, we never stop hiring substitutes. In part, that's because that sub fill rate is still around 75% on a good day, and that is too low. So yeah, I'd welcome you if you have any interest or flexibility. And you would just sign up whenever you're available. You don't get assigned, and there's no minimum number of assignments. So if you're like, once a month I can step in and do this, that would be awesome. Don't discount how much of an impact that would have.
And I guess I just want to clarify too. So the only you can't sub in your own child's classroom, right? So you would be putting in for sub assignments, but if you knew it was your child's classroom, then you would, that would be the one caveat, right, Mark?
That would be the caveat, yes.
Yep.
Thanks for clarifying that.
So, Morris Grove has had, ECAC teacher posted for a while, and needs a substitute presumably every day still. Is that correct? I think that's correct. But since my child's at Rashkus, I could, sub over at Morris Grove. And if you would want to say, I'm an ECAC parent, or I'm a parent of an EC student, I can also send that information over to Mark if you'd want to send it to the SNAC Gmail. But that's just another idea of how we can support, better substitute coverage in our schools, also as EC parents.
We got a good one here from Kate. Kate asks, what qualifications does a substitute need?
It's a great question, Kate. The bare minimum qualification is a high school diploma. However, if someone has a high school diploma and has not earned 48 hours of college credit, then there is a set of trainings they have to complete before they can step into a substitute role. However, if someone has 48 hours or more of college credit, so obviously that would also include if someone has an associate's degree or if someone has a bachelor's degree, then they are qualified to take on that position. There is a different rate of pay for certified and non-certified subs. So a non-certified sub for a teaching position makes $125 a day, and a certified sub would make $135 a day. So if you don't have a teaching license, you can still be a substitute. You would receive $10 less per day than your counterpart doing the same role who does have a teaching license.
All right, and Allie, you've got a good microphone, so I will let you unmute yourself and ask the question you put in the Q&A. Or I can read it. Okay. Is there any talk about raising EC teacher supplement or yearly bonuses? Is there compensation for all the extra workload?
I'll say if it's talk, it's not talk that I've been a part of. I think it's also a particularly tough time financially for our district. And so I have not heard that. I do know that, we're always looking at what are the high leverage things that we can invest in that will not only bring great teachers to our district, but keep great teachers in our district and great educators. And so I think we recognize that there would be a benefit from that supplement being higher for our EC teachers, but to my knowledge, that is not something that is currently in discussion. And then, we had some recruitment bonuses that were in place when we had those ESSER funds from the federal government related to COVID. When those expired, we also stopped that recruitment bonus program, and that did apply to EC teachers. So that was another kind of lever that we lost. So yeah, not a totally encouraging answer, but I'll tell you the answer that I have based on the information I have.
Thank you, Mark. And I think sometimes it's just helpful also to know, like, I like these conversations because it's helpful to know what you have to work with and what, where we are in comparison to the districts around us. I think those are helpful conversations. Because I grew up as a teacher's kid in Pennsylvania, and the pay scales are very, very much different in Pennsylvania than they are in North Carolina. And that was an eye-opening experience for me as a young person coming in being like, wow, this is a much different landscape. And I've heard that from a lot of other parents within the district that have moved here from different places and are like, teachers make what? And I think it's just helpful to have the lay of the land as well.
One non-monetary thing that Melissa mentioned was that teachers are always in need of tissues and wipes. So that's a good donation we can always consider as parents. Kate has another one. Is there a relocation bonus for folks who you recruit from out of state?
There is not. That's something. I was a charter school principal for 7 years in Durham, and that's something I was able to use. And it was really helpful because we know how transient this area is. We have a lot of folks who move into the area, either related to a partner's job or a partner's grad school acceptance, or just to live in a great place. And I liked having that to use. We don't currently have that as an option, but I do recognize it's a relatively common recruitment tool that is unfortunately not part of our tool belt.
Mark, are there any? Oh, sorry, hold on. We got another one from Allie. How is it decided how many EC assistants each school gets?
Oh, yeah. Do we have any members of the EC team on the call who would like to break that down? I can't see who we have here.
If you raise your hand, I can allow you to talk. Up, Erin, here we go.
We'll bring Erin over.
All right, Erin, it's all yours.
So there is not a formula for that other than for ECAC. For ECAC, we do have a policy related to that, a board policy related to that, which is 1 teacher and 2 TAs. We can go up to 8 kids in the classroom. I believe it's 2 TAs, but
You're right, Erin.
there's not a policy. We are actually working on figuring out how we can make it a little bit more uniform across the district, and when we're looking at students' needs and thinking about how that relates to TA allotments.
That's great. Thank you. Mark, one question that I had was, we talked about the biggest impediments to hiring and retention were payment and paperwork. What does the district think might be some strategies to address the paperwork issues? I know obviously the paperwork needs to get done. How can we make that easier so that it's a differentiator when we're attracting talent to Chapel Hill and Carrboro?
I think that it is a challenge because one of the options that we're not going to take the option of being non-compliant. And so I think not completing the paperwork, unfortunately, is off the table, or fortunately or unfortunately is off the table. The thing that I've had the most success with as a school leader was just release time to focus on being able to complete paperwork. So at our school, and again, I was running an independent charter school, so I had a lot more kind of flexibility than maybe our principals have. So I'm not trying to suggest something that creates a problem, but each of our EC teachers had 1 day per quarter in which they were released from all of their duties except for being able to focus on completing paperwork. And they would, time that along with, winter deadlines coming up, progress reports, and things like that. The biggest thing that I could do, because I couldn't take away the responsibilities, was try to provide time. And I think at a school level, that's kind of like the best thing that we can do. Here's the flip side to that. If I'm getting a release day to do that, that means I'm not providing services, and that's a slippery slope, right? So we know the paperwork needs to be completed. We want it to be high quality and in compliance. We don't want it to happen at the expense of providing the very services that the paperwork talks about. And so I think that's what's tricky about this. We were able to make it work, but that's kind of the best suggestion that I have based on my experience.
And this seems like this would be advocating for this like at a local school level. I mean, correct? Like this would be sort of dependent school to school.
Potentially. I think you're also like, if we were, and my goodness, I hope I don't start anything by suggesting something that becomes a problem, but I will just say, if we were to do this, there's a financial component, right? So we're talking about a teacher now who is not going to be providing, not going to be in class and would require a substitute. But typically a substitute is happening because like someone is like taking leave. And if that's not the case, then that has to be, the money for that substitute has to be accounted for somehow. And so there would be a financial component to it. And ideally, something like this works best if it is like applied across the board. What you don't want is a situation where, man, if you're an EC teacher at Ephesus, they really take care of you and you get time to complete your paperwork. But if you're at McDougall, you better stay up late, right? Like that doesn't create a good organizational culture either. I think the big takeaway here is, how do we give teachers time? And there's ways in addition to this, you can look at release time in terms of other duties that are required. Are there duties that you can like not hold EC teachers accountable for because they do have this other responsibility? I think that might have to be handled on a school by school level, or at least like a leveled, like elementary, middle, and high school. But the question is, where can we find time? And it's not just 10 minutes at a time, right? Because this is like heavy thinking, analytical work. And so, an extra 5 minutes here is not going to give me time to like start formulating academic goals for a student who really I need to put some real thought into. I need dedicated, extended time.
And this might be, we've got some questions in the chat here. And Kate asked another question, could there be solutions for completing paperwork with dictation, scribes, or AI? She's thinking like in healthcare, utilizes a lot of this technology. I don't know if you can speak to that, but I think that is an interesting question.
I've used dictation. I dislocated my finger when I was an EC teacher and couldn't type. And so
Hey, Mark, I'm going to jump in there. No,
go,
we
Erin.
cannot use AI because of the
Yes.
platform that it holds. It would hold student information on the platform, which might breach confidentiality. So no, we cannot.
Yeah.
Privacy data.
Yeah. Makes sense to shut down AI there. I agree with that. Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of dictation as like sort of like that speech to text tool that I used, and I don't even know if that's an option either. But it can be a slight time saver, but in general, there's not a lot of corners to cut in my experience besides just giving dedicated time.
And then this might be a question for Erin, actually. What are the EC caseload numbers for the average elementary EC teacher? Is there a limit?
So we do have an average. I can't give you the average right off the top of my head, and I don't have my computer open. But our goal is 10-to-1 for elementary, which is well below the state levels. The state level can go up to 35, I believe. And that might be for high school. But it is still well below the state limit for caseload sizes.
And I think that is, I've talked about this in the past, like generally part of the benefit of CHCCS is that EC caseload numbers are lower. And that's might also be a recruitment tool as well, because we do have lower caseloads than neighboring districts in general. And we do have an additional board policy for ECAC. So I think those two things, like, translate, hopefully to better retention as well.
No, I agree with that. As a former AC teacher and also as just like someone who's kind of worked in schools for a while now, I mean, there are EC caseloads that really reflect what the outer limit of the legal options are. And those are caseloads, like high numbers, especially in our secondary schools, that result in like a real lack of meaningful instruction because like they don't even like they might technically make sense, but they don't make academic instructional sense for kids. They don't create reasonable planning loads for teachers. And so you just end up with something that like looks possible on paper, but in reality is neither sustainable nor effective for kids. So I do think our caseloads kind of staying as reasonable as they can does set us apart from other districts and is a real both recruitment and retention advantage.
And Ms. Robinson also chimed in about what the legal caseloads are. They're not to exceed 35 for elementary school and not to exceed 50 for middle and high school. And as you can imagine, the more students on your caseload as an EC teacher, the more paperwork that has to be processed. So if we're staying below those, it's lovely that we stay below those limits.
My name is Kate. I have been asking these, interesting questions. Forgive me, I'm recovering from whatever junk my kids brought home. I, like Allie, have a kindergartner who's in EC, but we are at Sewell. I love the EC teacher that he's partnered with and so appreciate SNAC. My question about dictation or scribes or AI comes from a healthcare background. I'm a nurse practitioner, and Duke has implemented, and I know Duke has a lot of different money than Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools, but and I don't even work for Duke, but Duke has implemented an AI program with patient records. So when you go into a room with a potential primary care provider, your provider may be recording your visit, and that will generate a note. The recording gets deleted, and the provider is able to edit out whatever note is in there. It's not like it gets signed off or anything, but it creates like a more intentional presence with the patient. And so when I say AI, I don't necessarily mean like ChatGPT. I mean like if there's a platform out there that could somehow work, like I don't know how the ECAT system would work in that way, for IEPs and like bring down some of that paperwork burden. However, I think that if healthcare's figured it out, I think that it could be worthwhile to look into other districts who may have explored this option, recently or sometime in the last few years where it's become popular.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. I'm responding to we have asked that question about AI, and the answer that we got was very specifically the confidentiality related to it. And then just so the ECAT system is a statewide system that it would have to be incorporated through that company. And I just don't know that they have the capabilities at that time. It's a state-run system.
Okay, I appreciate that. Knowing that it's been asked before, at least, you guys are trying and thinking about that, because certainly healthcare folks know what I'm talking about. The paperwork burden is enormous. And it's hard to do dictation. I agree, like the little thumbs. but I will keep thinking about it. I'll keep thinking too, like Allie and the rest of us on the calls.
Thank you, Kate.
Mark, thank you so much. You have been a huge help in educating all of us about the realities of hiring and retention. And we're just so grateful for your presentation, but especially your efforts. And to everyone who joined and contributed, thank you so much. This is really, really helpful.
Thank you, everyone.